Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars reviews. This is going to be my review for The Mandalorian Season 3 Episode 3 and also The Bad Batch Season 2 Episode 13. So both I think you would say kind of odd episodes, kind of surprising with what both episodes did. But let's start with The Mandalorian. So, long episode, listed as like 59 minutes, much longer than any of the previous two episodes. And obviously, as we get into it, for quite interesting reasons, because yes, they bookmarked the episode with Din and Bo, aftermath of the previous scene, and then what we're basically set up for what we're doing next, I suppose, on his side of the story. But most of the episode is focused on basically giving the episode to Dr. Pershing to be the main character here, to have a just, you never cut away from this apart from at the very end of the episode. He gets the entire middle of this episode. Basically, he gets his entire episode, and then like the extra time that this episode is longer than the other episodes is the Mandalorian stuff. It's quite interesting what they've done here. Now, I personally like the decision because I like to see the Mandalorian kind of expanding out. That, in a way, until we properly get into the plot here, it does highlight that the Mandalorian as a series itself is not particularly like plot driven. Sure, we're expecting something with Mandalore to happen and more planning stuff to happen, but you also need to set up sort of, I suppose, villains on this side of things. And because we're set in between 6 and 7, they're using the Mandalorian to some degree to set up stuff as it goes from original trilogy into sequel trilogy, and I think we've known that that's been happening for a while now. And especially because this is airing at the same time as The Bad Batch, and was it the last episode or the previous episode of The Bad Batch quite heavily covered some stuff about like cloning. And it was interesting to see Dr. Pershing, who basically has cloning expertise, be the complete focus of an episode after having previously really only been part of the series in the first season for like a little bit. But they, in my mind, properly explored the New Republic for kind of one of the first times we've really seen in Star Wars media outside of, I think, some of the novels. And I think it made for a quite interesting episode overall. I understand to a certain degree people being a little frustrated that there was no sense of Pershing scene, Mando scene, Pershing scene. There's no sense of that. It was just Mando, Pershing, and then Mando at the end, and I understand that that's a little bit odd, but because I assume this will be a one-off episode and that it felt like this probably has to be at least Pershing done for now as a character, I think it works out okay overall. So I actually do want to start with the Mandalorian and Bo-Katan stuff, because it is the smaller section of the episode, and I think we should just kind of cover it, get it out of the way. So in the aftermath at the start of the episode, we of course get quite a large action set piece as they kind of leave Mandalore. And, as they're just kind of in the ship, they realize, oh, wow, the place is being attacked. The place is being bombed eventually. So we get a full-on fighter pilot kind of scene here, dogfight. And eventually, Bo-Katan's castle gets destroyed by bombers. Now, the mystery on this side of things is obviously that, keep in mind, we are in the era of the New Republic. The leftovers of the Empire are meant to be a smaller thing under the control of kind of warlords. But the main one, Moff Gideon, has been captured. Now, admittedly, in the episode, we more or less get the implication that he has somehow escaped or has been kind of sprung out, and the information's a bit kind of cloudy about what exactly is going on there. But the idea seems to be that there's more Imperial remnants out there than we otherwise thought. But who is controlling this specific group now? Because, okay, Mandalore was attacked during sort of the height of the Empire to take out Mandalore as being a potential kind of rebellious kind of faction because of how strong they are. But now that the New Republic is in charge, who is focusing on the Empire side of things on Mandalore so much that they want to continuously do bombing raid attacks on it? Is it Moff Gideon somehow already back in power in some way, or is it someone else? Because I know a lot of people are kind of thinking like, ooh, is this going to be a Thrawn type thing? Because of course we're expecting, we basically know in the Ahsoka series is going to like properly in live action introduce Thrawn into things, and he would make sense to be someone who could unite what's maybe left of the Empire in all of this, because that's kind of what this episode, in the ultimate takeaway probably was that, oh yeah, like the Empire is a bigger thing in this era than we maybe thought it would be, the leftovers. And in a way, the most loyal people to the Empire, that at this stage, the New Republic having established itself for at least a couple of years, the people who are still loyal to the Empire are the most loyal to the Empire. And that shows you how big of a kind of threat they are overall. But you see Bo-Katan have to deal with the idea of, like, she wants to go after the bombers, but Din can see the bigger picture that, like, there's more of them coming in. We're in trouble here. Because a whole fleet basically kind of comes in after them, and they have to escape into hyperspace. So it's setting up the idea that there is some sort of like imperial opposition in or around Mandalore, that I assume is going to be part of what we're doing here, is kind of liberating Mandalore, and it's going to involve a lot of, you know, gathering what's left of the Mandalorians to fight to kind of claim their planet once again. And there's obviously going to be some sort of a mystery about who exactly it is behind all of this. But what ends up happening here, and we get this in the end scene of the episode, is that Din brings Bo back to like the armorer, his, what do they call it, coven, I think. So his group, and he is redeemed. He shows them the vial of water that he takes. This is his proof, because it seems like no one's ever heard of a picture before in Star Wars. That is the funny thing in all of this, that like he deems the water sample as being more of a proof than like literally taking a picture of him doing some of this stuff, or like video footage or anything like that. When theoretically you assume a lot of that stuff is very, very possible to have done. I get it, there was a bit of action stuff involved in what happened. This is maybe a more easy way to do it, but you know, just the idea that we're in high-tech Star Wars, but we're like, yeah, this water sample is good enough proof. Now, ultimately, the question here was like, how are they going to prove this? It's just water, isn't it? But like, oh no, it's living water, and there's a test apparently that they know about to prove it is this specific water. So the armorer does that, it's proven to be the thing, and so just like that, 3 episodes into the season, Din Djarin is redeemed. The Mandalorian is redeemed straight away. So his plot is done for the most part. Now it's all about, okay, with him, where do we go from here? He's fixed the problem that he's sort of created for himself, but now what? He seems to care about Mandalore to a certain degree, and I suppose we're going to get to that in the coming episodes. So what it actually meant was that the more significant character stuff at this stage of the episode was actually the Bo-Katan stuff, in that, and I saw this coming because it's like, oh yeah, she went under the water as well. So she has, quote-unquote, redeemed herself as well for her clan previously not going along with the same ideals. But, as the armorer points out, you yourself, you have not taken your helmet off since this incident either. So technically, you are both valid options to join us here, so long as you go by these ideals. So I think Bo is going to have to obviously just do this just for the sake of having allies to potentially get something done. But there's also a little bit of a discussion to be had about sort of where her kind of faith in the kind of ethos of the Mandalorians actually like is. Because she saw a mythosaur down there. Din, it's revealed, of course, didn't see it. So she has seen effectively this borderline like god-like entity for the Mandalorians, that it's literally alive down there. So her faith has already been sort of like questioned to a certain degree. Now she's been brought back and quote-unquote redeemed with the remaining Mandalorians, and has been immediately accepted as one of their own because she's adhering to their ideals. But that's what's so interesting about it. She now can't take her helmet off. So you don't get to see her expression while all this is happening. Everyone's sort of, touching her shoulder, like, basically like, welcome to the club type thing. And you're like, is she cool with this? Or is she like, what's going on? she's obviously accepting the help here because otherwise she's once again completely out on her own. She doesn't even have a home. This is kind of what she has to do. But how does she truly feel about all of this? And how's this going to sort of like change things and so on? I think that's where obviously what happens in like the next episode is probably going to be quite important, because straight away you assume we are going to have to address the fact that Mandalore is inhabitable again. It's not cursed as a planet. The atmosphere is actually okay. Yes, there is some sort of like creatures occupying specific sections and stuff like that. The place is still a war zone from basically what happened before it. The planet is still wrecked to a certain degree, but it seems like if we go there and try, we can re-establish Mandalore if we absolutely need to. So, but is that the ultimate goal of this group, given the more recent history of Mandalore? Are they going to view this as like, yes, we will go back there and reclaim our homeland, or something else? Because again, this is the group that's more from Concordia rather than the planet Mandalore itself. So that's what's very, very interesting to me, in that like it arguably places more of the plot importance on Bo and like the armorer, and those two meeting is kind of like this like, ooh, what's this gonna be like? Do these two like know each other specifically? Because that's kind of the thing with the armorer, is like, who specifically is she apart from the knowledgeable armorer? That's a bit of an interesting decision. So yeah, the Bo-Katan arc feels like the more fascinating one right now that kind of the Mandalorian is sort of freed up from doing this. The big question in all of this that I do have though is, are we meant to feel like a bit like kind of cult with this group, or are we meant to be like, yeah, he's done it? Because I can't help but feel that it's a little bit of a, like, he hasn't actually really accomplished anything particularly notable in redeeming himself here. That it's just he's going to go back to the way things were before. And it's it's not really progress for the character. It's kind of a part regression. And I think probably what we're going to see going forward, if we're around this group a little bit more, is the restrictions of the cult basically getting in the way of what he truly wants to do in a way for Grogu, what he believes in for Mandalore, him caring to some degree about Bo. Those things I think will come in opposition to the group, and it's going to be about, does he care about sticking to all that stuff? Like the idea, does he need the group to note him as a Mandalorian to actually be a Mandalorian? And I think deep down he's going to have to come to realize that doesn't actually matter. You can take your helmet off at a specific time to look someone in the eye directly. It doesn't say anything about if you are or if you're not a Mandalorian. At least that's my take on things, is the idea is that it's not all about the really, really specific rituals. It's more about the broader sense of like, you know, do you have the heart of a Mandalorian rather than the rituals of a Mandalorian? But, you know, how are we going to get there? Because this gets into the Grogu situation of like, he's technically involved in this and they're okay with him not wearing a helmet because he's so young or whatever, I guess, theoretically. But do we want Grogu covered up with a helmet the whole time? I don't think we do. But we'll see what happens with that. And then we get to the other side of the episode, most of the episode. Dr. Pershing gets a huge focus throughout this episode. So we straight away find out about this, like, what's it called? The Amnesty Program, which is effectively the New Republic in terms of taking in kind of skilled people from the Empire, is attempting to reintegrate them back into sort of New Republic society so they can work and, you know, they don't have to just be prisoners for the rest of their lives. Dr. Pershing is part of that. He seems to very much want to go back to being able to use his expertise with cloning technology and be useful in that way. He really wants to emphasize the idea that my idea can help to bring effectively like organ cloning to more planets, and this will really help save people's lives. It's something that could have saved my mother. This is why I feel so passionately about it. But it seems like one of the things that the New Republic, in establishing itself, has established is that cloning technology is basically a banned subject. So he is not going to be allowed to continue his research, even though that's what he wants to do. And so the whole episode is sort of about presenting the idea that this amnesty program is actually helpful to certain people. Yes, there's a few automated stuff around the kind of seams of this that feel a little bit like, ooh, that's a little bit creepy. But the kind of core intent of the program, with some of the others involved in this, it seems like it is helping. That they're kind of trying to reintegrate the Empire people in the right way. As safely as possible. It's very controlled, but it seems like a somewhat reasonable and logical way to do it, even if you can be like, that's a bit creepy, some of the stuff going on. So I definitely take from Dr. Pershing is that he does kind of see the error in kind of what was going on with the Empire. I think he can see the idea that the New Republic does offer kind of a lot of kind of potential kind of going forward. And he really does want to use his scientific knowledge to help in a good way, not in an evil way. But what seems to be the actual kind of true plot by the end of this episode is the idea that the other character, let me just get the name again. This is Elia Kane, who I think we did see for at least a little bit in previous editions of The Mandalorian. She is revealed to also be part of this program. Who's been there for a little bit longer. And so she sort of kind of takes an interest in Pershing as someone who is kind of newer to this whole thing. And she tries to, over the course of this episode, sort of inspire him to continue his research. She basically pushes him to break some of the rules of the program, to find some way to start your research once again. Because this is something you feel passionate about, you feel like you need to help the New Republic, and this will help the New Republic. So she seemingly assists him in basically leaving the perimeter they're allowed a certain amount of freedom in, and going to the Imperial kind of dockyards where the Imperial ships are being dismantled. And she brings him there to find some basically kind of supplies so that he can start his research. But they are caught on the way out, and immediately you see the problem. They focus on him as breaking the law, not her. And it's revealed to be a setup that she has kind of lured him into this way to highlight that he is a part of the program who has, quote unquote, regressed, and he needs to be dealt with again. And so he is brought into, I guess, the kind of like the kind of punishment sort of facility for breaching the rules of the program. And they talked previously about how the Empire used things called like mind flayers to kind of like alter people's minds and stuff like that. And it's revealed here that the New Republic have something that seems to be very, very, very similar, but sort of slightly safer. And they're planning to do, on a very, very low level, use this thing to sort of ease his sort of Empire loyalty thoughts and kind of get him back on track like he kind of was before. But she manipulates her way into a situation where the main guard leaves, leaving her right next to the controls. She bumps up the controls to like 11, basically. And so the idea seems to be that this thing is now frying his mind. Like, that he is going to come out of this as like a blank slate. Or, with the way it seems to work, he is going to come out of this like what? The most loyal person to like the New Republic imaginable. He is going to completely forget all of what his motivations were. And it's obviously meant to be a big like heel turn, a big kind of villainous turn for this character, but in what way? Because I don't think the interpretation here is meant to be that she worked for the New Republic the entire time and this is her eliminating kind of the potential Empire stuff that was in him. My interpretation is definitely that she is 100% loyal to the Empire, ultimately. She played an amazing kind of double agent role in here, framing it as if I do like the New Republic, this is the direction that things need to go in. To kind of push him to, I suppose, see, like, if he is willing to properly get back into his research that is important to the Empire, that will potentially reveal it to the New Republic, and we don't want that because his research is ultimately key to whatever the Empire wants to do. Because they used to be on a ship together, so I suppose she theoretically knows what his ultimate skill level is, what the overall plan was. And so my interpretation here is that she was basically getting some loose ends out of the way. That he, in trying to do good for the New Republic, might have brought the true discovery within cloning to the attention of the New Republic, and it would have got shut down. So to avoid any suspicion being drawn on that, she has wiped his mind in some way. Now, in the grander scheme of things, the question here has to be, is Pershing like done as a character here? We got this focus on him here, but he's done. Or is this a thing where when the time is right, this process can be like reversed and we can bring Pershing back in for the Empire and use his research to do what we want to do. Now, the implication has to be that Pershing's research is going to be the key to ultimately where the true want of the cloning program is for the Empire. And that is related to stuff in the Bad Batch, like with the Zillo Beasts, but also, I think, ultimately, where the likes of Snoke and, I suppose, the actual Palpatine sort of clone comes from. That how can you get an actual Force-sensitive clone? And I think it's meant to be this sort of taking the best bits, but still recreating the person cloning technology that Pershing is working on. That can he find a way to do that where it's like it's a clone, but you can actually have a Force-sensitive clone. And obviously that was the kind of stuff from like season 1 with Grogu, which was why did they want his blood and him specifically as part of their program? Is I guess because they're gonna. I think what they're gonna reveal is that the Yoda species is such a Force-sensitive species that if you splice in specific parts of like their kind of genetic structure in with a clone of Palpatine, that is the way to make a clone actually be able to sort of have the Force. I think that's maybe the simplistic kind of overall lineup of what they're trying to do with this. Now, there's a little bit of a question of like, why in The Mandalorian? Well, okay, Grogu, you need Grogu. Straight away, that's the problem. Grogu is needed to make this actually happen. But do we want The Mandalorian focused in just initial setup for the sequel trilogy rather than him doing his own stuff? I'm not really sure, and that's where where a lot of the plots, ultimately cross over is going to be a very important thing for The Mandalorian as a show. So yeah, they're my thoughts on things. Definitely in the comments let me know if you interpreted things differently. But I'm definitely thinking that she is ultimately allied with the Empire. Because she's still part of the Empire up until the amnesty program, she was part of Moff Gideon's crew. These are the most loyal people to the Empire, and I think everything that she did here highlighted that she's some sort of a special agent in all of this, and if she's willing to do all of this, she is definitely for the Empire. And I think the Pershing stuff, the only thing I can think of is that to sort of shut him up for now so that he doesn't get the plan, the secret technology discovered, she has done this to him. And this is within the system the way to make that kind of happen. So will we see Pershing again? I think we will, but he'll be like this kind of pro New Republic zombie almost character who will just be going along with the flow. And it'll be the one maybe slightly questionable thing about the New Republic, but ultimately it was a Empire person sort of like behind it the whole time. Now, how much of a sort of like Hydra kind of type thing are we doing here? Where like, was it Captain America like stuff? Where are we kind of trying to make the point here that like there's Empire stuff hidden within the New Republic like all over the place, and that's what we're dealing with here, Empire sympathizers, or what? Because there's a few interesting little bits that we get through this, like the fact that like it is both the Rebel Alliance and Empire kind of ships that are being kind of deconstructed. So I think we know like Mon Mothma basically kind of fully demilitarizes the New Republic to the point where like they only have like, I guess, their like police force that we know about. And that's not much of a kind of battle force, which is why the First Order rising up is such a big deal and why there's very little opposition to that. Now, from a broader storytelling perspective, this is obviously the problem with a lot of this, is that you're making all these changes in a relatively short period of time. You've gone from actual Republic to Empire to New Republic to kind of First Order sort of being in control again, but not quite, is sort of the situation at the end of the sequels, towards the end of the sequels. And then the First Order is defeated and we have like the new Republic in charge. And it's like, which of these is good in any way? And especially, I think the New Republic, it is, I think, tricky to just overly present that as being like really, really negative when this is what the characters from the original trilogy fought to sort of help bring back. And especially knowing that like Leia is in somewhat of a significant position in some of this stuff, it feels a little weird that they're maybe presenting it as if it's almost just as bad as the Empire in certain ways. But like I said, I do think the overall interpretation is meant to be that you're like, this is better than the Empire, but it's not perfect. I think that's sort of meant to be the overall presentation of this. There are some things that make you question, but the core intent of trying to reintegrate people is fine. Because I get the impression that the other people they were talking to when they called Pershing over to talk with them, the other guys were kind of like more representative of, I think, how most of the program works, is that it probably is a success a lot of times, and they all can acknowledge that this is a pretty good thing. Even while they're walking around together and during the kind of celebration thing at night, and they show the little bit of the top of the Coruscant mountain, that's a nice thing to show that like stuff like this would never happen under the Empire. Everything would be harsh and brutal, like we saw in Andor. There is a difference, even if there are still like some remnants kind of left over in this. Not like, yes, it's this one ruling system replaced by this other system. There's still going to be some elements of a system there, you know, that you question. So fascinating episode. Obviously, mostly I think on the Pershing side of things, because I do wonder, like, as we go forward through the episodes, how much of the episode, like the time left in the show, is going to focus on this stuff. I assume we're building up to Moff Gideon like returns at some point. I'm guessing we'll get some sort of a setup stuff with Moff Gideon. We're going to eventually have more direct First Order setup, and so him, maybe a Thrawn might make an appearance here. We have to wait and see. And that's the stuff I'm excited to see, because I think once Ahsoka especially comes out, I think we're going to see a little bit of crossover stuff, because I think that was always the plan with a lot of these shows, is that we'd eventually build up to sort of the Star Wars like TV show kind of version of Avengers, where all these characters are like interacting with each other. And I think some sort of an early First Order thing makes sense to do something with. But yeah, next episode, I think what they need to do is on the Mandalorian and Bo-Katan side of things, is just, I think we need a really kind of big discussion between the Mandalorian, Bo-Katan, and like the armor, maybe the Vizsla guy as well, about just, okay, what are we doing now? Are we just hanging out here, or are we actually going to do something about Mandalore? And now that we know that there's Imperials kind of basically defending it to a certain degree, or stopping people from doing stuff on Mandalore and the system, what are we going to do there? Are we going to come in and attack? Are we prepared for that? Is there any way to get the other Mandalorians who used to be under Bo-Katan's command back? That's an interesting point. So, overall, pretty good overall. Then we get into the Bad Batch. So, my thing with this episode is that I felt very middle of the road with this episode. I didn't think it was bad, but I didn't think it was anything particularly amazing. I understand what the episode was trying to do. You were trying to basically just have it be sort of, here's a vacation in a way for the group. Omega gets to just hang out with someone her own age, have a friend. The Bad Batch are basically given the direct kind of, proposition of, you can stay here. You can just be at peace here and live on this kind of nice island place that likely won't ever come into contact with the Empire, because we don't have crazy natural resources. There's nothing that they particularly would want from us. It's as best a place to just be as you could probably find in the galaxy. What about it? Is this what we want to do? And they prompted that idea without, I think, really exploring it. And I think that's my problem, and in a way, what's been my problem with a lot of the Bad Batch focused episodes with these characters, is that they'll bring up an interesting topic, but they'll never cover the topic. And by that I mean, like, they never really talk at length about some of the stuff that you want them to talk about. And even when they do, it's often very basic. Like the Omega Tech episode was nice, but it was very basic what they ended up actually talking about. Similarly with this one, you never really get, say, like Hunter talking to Omega about, like, is this what you want? Would you like to stay here? What is it you actually want to do? Are you just sticking with us because you feel you have to, because we're sort of quote-unquote related to a certain degree? Do you have a dream or a goal you want to accomplish yourself? They haven't really gotten into that. And even with the Omega side of things, we're like, okay, it was cool that she met this girl here and they're friends now. But it's like, I didn't get too much from the character of that girl. And I'm kind of like, what are we meant to take away from this? Because again, they never asked her, and so we never got the response from Omega of just she wants to do what she wants to do. Because I get the point. Like, it was brought up, the idea of, like, it's cool, like, you're teaching her to fight, like, it's paying off, like, look how impressive she was in that brawl. I think we see Omega technically quote unquote kill someone for the first time on screen here, with her taking out one of those kind of like antique dealer guys. That's sort of notable. But is that the life that we sort of want for Omega? And in terms of, if the Bad Batch get involved in the kind of Empire kind of conflict, what are her thoughts on that? Does she, like sort of Echo, also want to fight for what's right and join the Empire? Or is there something else that she wants to do? I think you can tell she's very upset about, like, the loss of Camino because of the Empire, and that is a driving force for her, to where I think she would probably surprise Hunter and the others by basically being like, no, I want to play a role in this conflict coming up. But we didn't have that conversation. Now, admittedly, it seems to be a kind of two-parter kind of style episode where it seems like when we come into the next episode, we're still going to be here on this planet. So at least we'll get the opportunity to maybe have the conversation that we maybe needed to from this episode. Otherwise, I do feel like this episode relied quite a lot on just sort of like the beauty of the animation and kind of what was happening here, a nice island planet, the effects for when they were doing the wave coming in and stuff like that. Otherwise, it felt rather basic in terms of what we were actually like talking about and exploring. The other big point in the episode was that they did kind of just randomly at the start reveal that the Bad Batch have specifically decided to break away from Sid, and Sid is annoyed, and they're warned that, you know, she's not gonna kind of take this lightly in a way. I'm glad that it seems like we've finally done it, but I'm wondering, like, is there a plot point coming up where we're dealing with whatever vengeance Sid can bring upon them? Or are we just done with it and she's just going to be an angry kind of shouting hologram for the rest of the show? Because I felt we've needed to do this for a very, very, very long time. For the sake of the show and having a better character arc and story for the Bad Batch as characters, you need to separate from Sid, because it was just holding the show back in a quite heavy way in my mind. So we've finally done that, but we're still not really talking about what we're actually planning to do. Now, the only thing I can think of is that obviously I'm guessing the Empire will come to this Pabu in the next episode. They will probably hear that the place was decimated by a giant tidal wave, and the Empire will come under the guise of, we will help you rebuild, but in helping you rebuild, we will take over your planet. I'm guessing that's what's going to happen. Now, the big question is probably going to be, when does Crosshair get introduced? When will he be part of, like, the Empire showing up near the Bad Batch? Will it be here on Pabu and we get that encounter once again? Given that I'm guessing we're doing some sort of a thing where, like, Crosshairs has maybe been, like, double brainwashed to be fully loyal to the Empire, forget all your kind of free will type stuff. With the idea, I think, being that Omega and the Bad Batch are maybe capable of snapping him out of it one last time type thing. So I think that might be what we're building towards, because next week will be the last individual episode before the end of the season, because after that we are getting a two episodes in 1 week finale to end off. So there are 3 episodes left, but basically 2 weeks of content. So that's good to know. Otherwise, like I said, like I don't really have a lot to say on a specific kind of point about the episode. Like, were they kind of teasing a relationship between Tech and our kind of pirate friend there? They paired them up a little bit, but like I felt like they really set a line that they weren't quite willing to maybe go over with the dialogue just yet. Maybe it's just that Tech is very oblivious, and so they just left it like that. But maybe they'll do something with that, because that's the sort of stuff that I think you need. You need all these little bits and pieces to help further individualize and characterize these clones, because it's fascinating to me that, like, say in the last episode, not just the fact that's Crosshairs, but Mayday as a character, as a clone from the last episode, stands out so much more to me than, say, like anything Wrecker has done this season. And most of what like they've done with Tech this season, I don't think is quite as interesting as some of the Mayday stuff that they have going on. They're the kind of, I think, challenges that the show is still facing, because a lot of these kind of quote-unquote filler episodes have been very focused on basically, here is the gimmick introduced for this episode. We'll focus really heavily on the gimmick, and this very, 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 very minor character plot focus with the other stuff going on in the episode, like the characters and stuff like that. I'm hoping they can get things to a point where, as we're leading into the finale with the next episode, and then getting into the two-part finale, we can just do some pretty big stuff. But I'm worried that the Bad Batch is still in this sort of position where we're still in setup mode. And especially if we have to deal with the Sid stuff, I'm worried that that's going to be like the finale arc for them. It's just the wrath of Sid, which I don't think I really care about that much. Whereas I want the Crosshairs to cross over with the Bad Batch. That's what I think the show needs to be better. We need them to just be like, we are involved in the conflict now for sure, and just to set the show on a right path. Because at this point I feel like we are getting a season 3. That's the way I feel about it, is that there's no way they're going to wrap all this up in just a few episodes. So I feel we're at least getting a season 3, and that might be like the final season. And I think to do that, you need to end this season with these characters having made a decision on what they're actually planning to do. Because I think the one major issue with this season was just the direction of the Bad Batch. And hopefully they can get us on track in the remaining episodes. So there are my thoughts on the 2 episodes of Star Wars that we got this week. Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 3, and The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 13. So let me know what your thoughts were on both of these episodes. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.